That title was a mouthful, so we changed it to channel marketing. So channel marketing is food service, and it's retail, and it is also anything that we call alternate channel markets. So when you're looking at this data that we were talking about with IRI, it's every major restaurant chain. It's the food service distributors that sell to the restaurants, independent restaurants, and also distribute to the restaurant chains. It's every retailer that is a traditional retail grocer. It is club stores, mass merchandising stores. So club stores being Costco, Sam's Club. Mass merchandisers are big box stores like Walmart, Target. Plus, you've got dollar stores, convenience stores, anywhere someone buys pork or food to sell it to someone to consume. That is channel marketing. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty big universe. Combined, it is about 1.56 trillion dollars in those two businesses, and it's a little heavier in dollar sales in food service and alternate channels than it is in retail grocery. So just to give you an idea on that, we at the Pork Board use a lot of data. As you can imagine, we look at the demand landscape and work with every one of these examples that Francia was showing us. They look at their own data, and we work with data. But the bottom line is that pork is food. We can look at data, and we can learn from data, and it's important to do, and everybody's looking at everything in every different way. Believe me, we look at IRI data, Nielsen data, so it's transactional data. We look at digital ethnography and deep listening on social media. We're looking at CREST data, Data Central data, Technomics data. I mean, there's just data to look at everything. But the bottom line is it's food. I don't know. How many people in the room actually raise pigs? So I've raised pigs, and I would not have raised pigs unless they were going to become food. They're just not fun. They're just not fun. So I want to talk a little bit about pork's role in food service, and if you have questions as we go along, I'll be happy to answer them. But I'll just give you a snapshot on some of the things that we look at or doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about short on the statistics, just to give you an idea of kind of where pork is being sold in food service and what's happening there. And it is a story about flavor. I'm not going to get too deep into the numbers, and I always like to remember what Samuel Clemens once said, is that there are three kinds of lies. There are lies, damnable lies, and statistics. So you can look at everything any kind of way and make your story, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work to deliver culinary inspiration into the food service world, some of the things we're doing to help drive demand, because demand and the price per pound are the two things that matter. How much is sold times how much the average retail price of that product is demand. And that's what we look at, real per capita expenditures. And then some of the things we're working on right now into 2018 to ensure continued success of pork in food service, and it's also going to trickle into retail and that whole gray area that is all of these alternate channels. Because I've been in the food service business for 30 years. I've been working in food service marketing for 25 years, and things are changing faster now than I have ever seen. Things are moving quickly, and the lines are getting blurred, and that's why we're now channel marketing and not food service marketing and retail marketing, because it's just not that cut and dry anymore. So a little bit about pork and food service. The good news, pork is the fastest growing protein in food service since 2011. Over the past 6 years, and we measure this every other year through a volumetric assessment of pork sales and food service with Technomic here in Chicago, pork has grown on a pound basis by more than double the next fastest growing protein. And in some years, you'll see it was actually growing faster than all other proteins combined. So pork is really doing well in food service. You could see here 2011 to 2013 to 2015 to 2017, that growth. It's slowed a little bit in the last 2 years, but that slowing is really is attributed to a few things. And if anybody's ever been in the sales business, you know that doing really well and having really good growth is a wonderful thing until you have the next year and you have to sell against your own numbers. So rapid growth and strong growth is a good thing, but to grow beyond that the next year, it does, your volume is there, but your percentages are a little lower. And we had really good growth even during PEDV in pork and food service. So they pushed through that price sensitivity in food service. It was growing and there was no stopping it. And it continues to grow in food service. Now, food service as a whole is starting to soften a little bit. And you know, it's like tax cuts and budget cuts in government, is that what we call softening is less growth than we thought. So it's still growing, it's just not growing as fast as it has been in the past, mostly having to do with casual dining. So casual dining is what we call in the food service industry the dinner, lunch and dinner restaurants that serve alcohol. So think of Fridays, Chili's, Applebee's, that sort of restaurant. There is a softening in that area, and the growth has all been through fast casual. So those are places that you go up and order, they give you a number, you sit down, they bring you your food, and you leave because you've already paid, and there's no tipping involved and no server involved. So we've seen some softening in food service, mostly because that area of casual dining is really struggling. But pork is still doing well there. Here's a little bit of look at the food service pork market size. These colors, I'm sure you can't see real well the bottom numbers here, but the orange is bacon. It's 20% of pork sales in food service. The red is ham, and that's all processed ham. Breakfast sausage is in green, and then the others are ribs, which domestic ribs are growing. We are seeing a real resurgence in, and maybe it's a reaction to local. You know, sometimes when you're big, when you're Chili's, local might be North America. So Chili's just switched from Danish back ribs to domestic back ribs, and so did Fridays. And we're talking tens of millions of pounds, which is going to be really good for the price of ribs and cutout value. Pepperoni and pizza topping, and then all other pork. So about a third of the pork sales is everything other than the processed in food service. So in food service, we are the flip of retail. About 65% processed, about 35% fresh. And the fresh is mostly middle meat. So we're talking about loins, some shoulders, and some fresh, a little bit of fresh belly, but it's mostly loin meat, middle meat, and not ribs, and not everything else that makes up breakfast. Retail is about a flip of that. So the majority of it, 65 to 70%, is fresh. The rest of it is processed. So we do swap out the priority there. This is pork usage by day part, and day part in food service is breakfast, lunch, dinner, and what came about 5 years ago, which is called snacking, which means you telecommute and you can go eat whenever you want, and that's snacking, right? So breakfast all day has changed these numbers with some major limited service restaurants or quick service restaurants. We call them, you may see them in the presentation as LSR or QSR. It's really changing. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack. You can see kind of where that breakout is in pounds. And then all food service all food service share of all day parts on the right, on your right, 2017 is for all pork products for the entire industry. So you can see we've got a big chunk in lunch. We've got a strong portion of dinner, of breakfast sales, but the snacking is growing, and that's really a blurring of just when people eat and when they reported that they ate that meal. This is a bit of an eye chart. Pork products, the bottom line is, look at that big top line, bacon, right? Bacon is flavor, it's delicious, it's slimming, it's gluten-free, right? It's all the things that are important these days. Like, who cares, right? It's delicious and it's growing. Breakfast is a compilation of everything else. Breakfast sausage, ham, pulled pork. We have raw material for pulled pork here listed, and also pulled pork, which is something that's already been cooked and being sold as pulled pork. You can see they're both growing quickly. Pizza toppings always is kind of, pizza business is kind of lagging a little bit because of the amount of people that are looking at low carbohydrate diets. So it's a younger crowd that's eating pizza, as kind of it has always been. Canadian bacon's on the rise because of all day breakfast. But you'll see that carnita meat and pork as an ingredient is growing. So these are areas where people, the way people eat and how they eat and what they're eating is getting away from a big piece of meat as center of the plate and some protein involved in their meal throughout the day. And you're going to see some growth areas there. And that's what we have to keep looking at it. We can't say, well, that's terrible, we want to sell big pork chops, because then we'll put ourselves out of business doing that. So we have to look at where is the growth, and let's make ourselves relevant to that growth. A little bit about operator volume segmentation for pork. Again, limited service restaurants are about a third of all commodity value for pork and food service. Full service restaurants a little less. And then it really breaks down into small numbers after that. It is spread out everywhere. Lodging, which is hotel and resort, college and university, healthcare, recreation, that includes state parks, cruise lines, that sort of thing. B&I is business and institution. That is a cafeteria within, say, Google's headquarters here in Chicago. School being K through 12, supermarket, food service, growing area, but you can see there that it's 2% of pork volume, but prepared foods in the grocery store is 7% of all commodity value there. So we're under-penetrated there. So we look at that as an opportunity for pork to get into prepared foods in the grocery, and we know that's an area that is growing. Other retailers, those are dollar stores, anywhere else that you're going to find food being sold for consumers to consume. Bacon, bigger than ever. It's a train on the tracks. It's not slowing down. We can't even fill cold storage up anymore like we used to with bellies. When I first started at the National Pork Producers Council, when I was interviewing, they said, well, we're going to hire you, but not for a few months because we have to wait till next year because we're on a hiring freeze, and bellies were 8 cents a pound. Right now, they've been double pork loins. So Everett, we were in Cartagena in July, and that was the big question that the importers down there had, is saying, when is pork belly pricing going to drop? That's all they wanted to talk about, and we didn't have an answer for them. So it's stabilizing, but it's a new pattern now, and there's no stopping this train for sure. So a little bit about delivering culinary inspiration. Consumers love pork at restaurants. We talk to them. This is from Technomic Center of the Plate report from this past spring. 82% are eating as much or more pork from restaurants versus a year ago. Now, what we do know is that they're eating it. We've got to make sure it's available to them where they're eating it. People are getting takeout. People are getting food delivered. People are eating all times of the day and night. People are buying food in the grocery store that's already prepared. It's a real mix of how people eat, how they get food, and when they get food, and that's changing rapidly. But they are continuing to look for pork dishes. And we're making sure that when they're looking for it, that it's available. So consumers continue to want adventurous flavors. They want flavor. When you survey people, they will always say, if you say, are you concerned about your diet? Are you doing anything to lower your fat intake or your calorie intake? They go, absolutely. And then they go out and eat a hamburger with 4 slices of bacon on it, right? So what they say when they survey and what they're doing is always a little different. But they want flavor. That's what they're looking for. So 41% want to try pork made with new, unique flavors, and that's up 5% more than just 2 years ago. And 40% want pork dishes with ethnic flavors and ingredients. Pork is the most consumed animal protein in the world. We are authentic. Pork is authentic to most ethnic cuisines where they eat pork. We are usually the authentic protein to be there. And what our job in channel marketing is to make sure that when these trends come about in this country and people are looking into finding what they're going to eat next, that a traditional pork dish doesn't become a chicken breast dish or a ground beef dish by the time it gets on the menu here. And that's a big part of what my team works on. It's on trend and authentic to global cuisines. If you're looking for a trendy pork dish to add to the menu, you'll certainly be up to the minute if you dabble in carnitas. And this is from National Culinary Review from this past fall. They did a 5-page story about pork in Latin American, Central American, Mexican cuisine. This National Culinary Review is a monthly magazine for the American Culinary Federation. Pork is popular and chains love its versatility. And this has a lot to do with making sure products are available that restaurant chains can use and can use the one item that they bring in for more than one dish. And that's a big issue, is that in the past, and pulled pork is a good example of this. 7 or 8 years ago, pulled pork was cooked, and it was in a tub in barbecue sauce, and it was pretty sweet, and it was probably about 20% volumized vegetable protein or texturized vegetable protein mixed into that to lower the price. That was it. That's what was available. We did a test 14 years ago with McDonald's for a pulled pork sandwich, and it was that product. It went onto the bun with an ice cream scooper. It was not delicious. And if anybody knows barbecue, if you're from South Carolina, your idea of barbecue is a whole lot different than if you're from Kansas City or Texas, right? So one sauce doesn't work. And that's why we work to make sure that we get products available to restaurant chains, and you'll see everybody's got some version of pulled pork now. Pulled pork is our hamburger in limited service restaurants. And it's smoked, tender, juicy pulled pork with no flavor other than savory flavoring. So they can dress it, build it, make multiple sandwiches out of it. They're not bringing in one item, using it for 6 weeks, and then getting rid of it. They're using it. It's in the pantry now, and it's on the menu now year-round. And that's where we want it to keep the price up. We don't want to spike supply chain by selling something to manufacture a product for a big chain and then stop, and the price drops back down, and the cold storage fills back up until they start buying it again. You know, how many people have eaten a delicious McRib sandwich? Oh, you're missing the boat. It's made with pork shoulder and pork belly. It's an amazing sandwich. It really is. We helped with the technology to make that sandwich 20 years ago with McDonald's when they were having crazy chicken prices. And they were saying we need to ease off of the chicken McNugget business with something, and they wanted an alternative. McDonald's cannot run McRib year-round because there's not enough product to make it. They buy so much of the shoulder and belly to manufacture that product. They buy it until they start to drive their own price up, and then they have to stop. Otherwise, the sandwich wouldn't be profitable. So they can't even run it year-round. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of pounds for a 6-week limited time offer. So we want product that is in the restaurant that's going to raise the price of pork shoulder or raise the price of pork loin or raise the price of ham and keep it there because they're able to use it year round. So we work with chefs and industry partners to identify trends and then tell that trend story through a pork lens. So we want to make sure that we're telling the story of the trend, but that we're saying this is authentic to pork. Let pork tell the story. So somebody else doesn't kidnap this trend and make it again something with boneless, skinless chicken breast, which I'm not allowed to say this normally, but I think it's out of season. Pretty sure it's out of season. So we do trend mapping. This is how we keep an eye on kind of what's happening. We know that when you look at fine dining restaurants in that block 1 on your left, what's happening in fine dining, independently owned restaurants, food trucks, authentic ethnic restaurants, this is where trends are being identified. This is where they're coming from. Usually, it's people in the food business, people in grocery, in prepared food, in restaurant chains, chefs that own or run restaurants are looking for inspiration, and they're looking for things they like to eat. When they find things they like to eat and that are new to them, they want to bring it back to their restaurant and try to translate it onto something that works for their business. Once that starts to happen, and we're calling that inception, it'll start to show up in industry and gourmet food media. So online and publications where they're saying, this is something that we're seeing that's interesting. And then it shows up a little bit in specialty retail or online retail. It's going to go to a story in mainstream women's magazines and food magazines. It's going to show up on recipes, will show up on websites like Yumly or All Recipes. You'll see recipes showing up. You'll see them on the cover of the magazines next to Elvis is Still Alive, you know, when you're checking out at the counter. And then full-service chain restaurants will start to adapt it and pick it up, and it will end up as something they talk about on the Food Channel or a cooking channel. And then eventually it hits ubiquity, which is quick service or limited service menus and mainstream grocery. So think about sriracha. Does anybody not know what sriracha is? It's a hot sauce. It is a Southeast Asian hot sauce that's made in California. It's a red clear bottle with a green cap and has a rooster on the front of it. It is the hot sauce du jour over the last 3 years. Chefs knew what it was. They found it by eating Vietnamese food. They started to use it. They started to put it on their tables. They started to ask for it, and now you can get a sriracha sauce on a sandwich at McDonald's. That happened in about 5 years. So this trend used to be a 7 to 10 year process, is now kind of a 3-year process. It's really accelerating. So we're always watching this. So how trend mapping works in practice here is Mexican cuisine menu penetration. So menu penetration is the percentage of U.S. restaurants' menus that feature an item that falls into this category. And this is just a 10-year chart to look at using Data Central tool within Snap, which is their desktop that we use. 22% menu penetration. Growth since 2007, up 13% for Mexican cuisine category. Up 8% over the last 4 years and still growing at about 1% in the last year. Here's tacos on mainstream menus, up 25% in the last 10 years. So your perception and probably exposure to taco has changed a lot in those 10 years, if you think about it. I mean, who was eating fish tacos unless you were in Baja, Mexico 10 years ago? Taco was the hard shell, right? The old El Paso kit, little ground beef, little chopped lettuce, little shredded cheese out of the bag, right? Some salsa. Tacos now are carnitas, tacos al pastor, you know, all of the authentic regional flavors in soft white corn tortillas. It's a completely different category now than it was 10 years ago. You can see it's grown 32% in 10 years. That's huge. So again, what we look at is say, pork is authentic to pork. Let's keep pork the protein of choice there in that center of the plate. So Carnitas, this is cooked, braised, cooked, fried pork. Up 30% in 10 years, still growing but it's still 7.4% menu penetration. It's got room to grow, and it is growing. Regional Mexican cuisine is really where we're seeing trends, and this is kind of what we tend to see. You know, 50 years ago, Italian food in the United States was spaghetti and meatballs, and then there became northern Italian cuisine and southern Italian cuisine. The same thing is happening with most cuisines in this country. Regional Mexican is happening right now. Looking at the Baja region, Sonora, the Yucatan Peninsula, Oaxaca, Michoacan, the central Mexico area around Mexico City, they all have little differences in their cuisine and their ingredients and their climate that affects the food there. So some of the things that we're seeing grow, and we're going to continue to see grow, one is cochinita pibil. This is from the Yucatan. This is basically a whole roasted pig. But it's suckling pig or small roasting pig, but it can be also done with pork shoulder. And this is basically their version of a simple pit roasted pulled pork. Carnitas from Michoacan, which are whole hog carnitas. Tortas and samitas, these are sandwiches. Moles, the braised dishes from Oaxaca. Carne adobada from the Baja area and from up in Parrilladas, which is the authentic fajita from Sonoran area. These are the places where we're seeing real growth in variations of pork in Mexican cuisine. Just some delicious pictures to make you hungry, in case you've been from breakfast for a while. Other emerging trends that we've identified and that we're working with the industry and major chains with is specialty, premium, and regional hams. Ham, you can get ham sampler plates now on restaurant menus. You weren't seeing that 5 years ago. You weren't seeing that 10 years ago. And chefs are starting to say, I don't want to just buy ham, I want to make ham. They'll buy ham if they're making lots of sandwiches or like Italian cold cut subs or hoagies, whatever you call them, wherever you are in the country, grinders. But they're making hams. They're making specialty hams with different cures and different brines. And they're buying whole legs and BRT, or bone rolled and tied fresh legs, to cook, to use each muscle to make a different ham. Porchetta. Has anybody had or seen the porchetta sandwich at Arby's this year? Oh, you missed it. Limited, how was it? Right? Delicious. Porchetta is an old Roman recipe where it was a whole hog that was boned out, seasoned with rosemary and garlic and fennel pollen and red wine vinegar and olive oil and salt and black pepper and hot pepper, then tied back up and roasted in a hot oven until the skin is crispy and they'd slice it. Tronchetto is the loin wrapped in its own belly with that flavor. And they slice it real thin, hot, and make an amazing sandwich out of it. That's growing like crazy. If it's on Arby's menu, it's hitting ubiquity. So you're going to see this continue to grow. Bao, steam buns, dumplings. Pork is the filling of choice there. High quality roast pork loins. So whole pork loins have been flavored, and then they're shaved hot to make sandwiches. So really good, flavorful roast pork. Korean barbecue. Tonkatsu. Tonkatsu is that fried pork cutlet from Japan with that plum and Asian pear sauce that goes with it. It's fantastic. They make little sandwiches. You can buy them in 7-Elevens in Japan called a katsu sando. And it's just it's fried pork cutlet on white bread with the crust cut off in a little container like the old pimento cheese sandwich, excuse me, in the shelf. That's growing because it's the interest of sushi is ubiquitous now. Chefs dug in deeper. They love ramen. Ramen, beyond college dollar packet ramen, is growing. And they're saying, what else is on that Japanese menu, that Japanese cuisine that we can eat that we love? And tonkatsu and schnitzel and milanesa from Mexico. These are all pork cutlets that are breaded and fried that are coming back into popularity as cuisine that pork should own. A little bit about driving demand. We try to impact demand with the energy that we do. We don't do general market advertising anymore, where we're buying television time or magazine ads. What we're really working on is providing educational information in a digital format to consumers. So when they go to Google and they ask, and they're going there 60,000 times a second, I think, something like crazy like that, right? When they go there and say, how do I cook a pork chop? We want to make sure that they get a video or an answer from the National Pork Board that answers that question in a format that they want to see, so that they can learn to cook and enjoy our product. That's where we're putting our time and energy, and we're working with chefs to create recipes and videos so that they're interesting and entertaining, but they're also educational. And we're doing it both for retail and for food service as well as consumer. We're doing all three. And we're focusing on ham and loin. We don't need to invest in how to enjoy bacon, right? We need to talk about how to, loin is an underutilized cut of pork right now. It is very inexpensive, and it is incredibly available to use in retail and in food service. So we want to make sure that that's successful. The Taste of Now campaign is running right now to all of these audiences. It's about what's on trend, how to fit fresh ham and cooked and cured ham and loin into any season, any time, every occasion, an opportunity to use those at home or to use them on the menu to grow. It's about flavor, because this is all about flavor. And it's about integrated events to talk to editors, to make sure that editors are writing about pork in a positive way and are excited about it. So we did a dinner at our second dinner at the James Beard House called Porkapalooza, where we bring in a bunch of chefs and each one does a different course for a bunch of about 80 editors. We just did pork crawl. It was the pork chop crawl in New York City, where we had pork chop dishes. And if you've ever want to go to New York City or any city and eat 9 pork chop dishes in a row in one afternoon, take a look at our newsletter. It just came out yesterday, the 400. It'll give you a recap on that. From the blade end of the pork loin to the sirloin end of the pork loin. We had a different chop at every stop. The print and digital advertising that we're doing for the trade, our videos that are available on pork.org, and both the consumer and trade formats within pork.org. So, and ensuring continued success going into 2018, we're really taking what we're calling the 3 keys to success. We've called it the 3 pillars to success for the pork loin. We've called it the 3-legged stool. We've called it the 3-legged grill. This is all conversation that we've been working on for years, but the bottom line is it's about proper endpoint cooking temperature. And we've got, in 2014, the USDA allowed us to message consumers that they can cook whole muscle pork loin to 145 degrees and that it's safe and that it's going to be moist and delicious. It used to be 160. It's been 145 in food service since 2001 in the food code. So it is now 145. And as you can imagine, every cooking instruction on every package of pork in every grocery store, every thermometer manufacturer that has a preset temperature for pork, we have to work with all of them to get this changed. It's something that we announced in 2014, but it's going to take a long time to make all of these changes. But we're working on it constantly, and we will continue to put that message forward. One of the things we're doing this today actually is we're shooting some images of cooked pork loins so that we have more assets for partners like retailers and food service operators that want to use that for training. Because most consumers don't have an instant read thermometer or don't use an instant read thermometer. They kind of want to know how long does it take to cook this. So we're working on a lot of that information. Nomenclature for the pork loin. This is looks like a group that loves acronyms. We worked with ICMISC, the industry-wide cooperative meat identity standards council, a few years ago. And those are people from North American Meat Institute that published the Meat Buyer's Guide for food service, and also the PRRS manual, which is the Unified Retail Meat Identity Standards booklet. These are where people who cut and sell pork to food service and grocery get the specifications on how to cut something, and also what the legal names are for the USDA identification. And we changed the nomenclature for pork chops to make it more recognizable for consumers and food service operators. And last is identifying some pork quality. And we know that we can measure quality, and it's about making different variations of pork quality available to consumers so that they have a more consistent eating opportunity. You put all of these three things together, we can't possibly lower the price of the pork loin anymore, so it has to help, right? So Doneness, for best eating experience, if you don't know it already, we recommend cooking pork loins to 145. That's a warm pink center or medium rare. It is safe, it's delicious. If you like to cook it a little more, cook it just like we tell people, cook it just like the way you like to eat your steak. This is from Nick Solaris on the Meat Show from March. He's on Eater. Try pork medium. It's not going to kill you. It'll actually make your life better. I believe that. Nomenclature. This is delivering value to operators, and you're seeing this happen more and more in the grocery area, and it's been happening in food service. You can order a porterhouse pork chop, or a T-bone chop, or a sirloin chop, or a New York chop. Most consumers, when we've done the research, understand what that is. Right now, we sell a package in retail called assorted pork chops. Can you imagine going to a grocery store and buying assorted steaks? What your expectation would be and what your experience would be? It's kind of nutty. But we've been doing it for years, and we're working with all of the major retailers to really package up center cut chops or New York chops, ribeyes, T-bones, and porterhouse chops, and put them out there, and you can position them so that you can charge various prices based on what people are looking for. Your boneless, center cut boneless chops can be your value chop, and your thicker and higher quality chops that'll provide a more consistent eating experience, like a porterhouse chop. You can charge more money for that. It works, and you're leaving money on the table if you're putting them all together in one package and selling them at the lowest price you possibly can. You'll move volume, but you won't raise your sales or your profit. And we've been doing it in food service for years. So you can get a porterhouse chop at a restaurant. You can get one at Outback. But it's going to take a little while to get that information into those scales, into the grocery stores, where when they weigh out that package, they can put that UPC code in and get that printed on the label. And that's something we're working on diligently moving into 2018 and beyond. It's in the Meat Buyer's Guide. It's in the PRRS manual. It's available to use. It's in the Meat Tracks database as well. And then quality. And this is about consistency more than anything. The USDA, if you don't know and haven't seen it, they recommended on October 23rd They put on the Federal Register a proposal to change the pork quality grading standards for market hogs, barrows, and gilt carcasses, but it's specifically mostly for loin quality. And they put out a proposal to create 3 levels of quality grading that would be voluntary for pork loin. It is select, choice, and prime. And each one has a color grading and minimum marbling score for each area. And we've provided them with a bunch of research that shows that people are willing to pay for the quality that they like. If they like a paler, leaner chop, or if they like a darker, more marbled chop, they're willing to pay for those differences as long as they're getting a consistent eating experience. And right now, we provide a pretty consistent, inconsistent eating experience in retail. Food service and export cherry picks all the good stuff, and everything else that's left goes to grocery. And grocery's getting wiser about that, and they're working with major, I'm not allowed to call them packer processors anymore, they're global food companies. They're working with global food companies to set some specifications that follow the same proposal that the USDA is putting out there. So they have specifications for color and marbling on branded product. Distributors have had it in food service since 2004. Every major packer processor has some product that fills that niche. And over time, it'll just give us the opportunity to sell something consistently to the market and maybe not leave money on the table because we're discounting everything at the retail end, which doesn't help back to the producer when he's selling pigs.